Thank you for joining us for tonight's show. My name is Keiko Agena, and I am one of the new members of Impro Theatre main company. Now, we recognize the immense challenges that artists and theater companies are still facing in the light of the pandemic. In our mission to spread joy, Impro has been active throughout the pandemic. In addition to our classes going online, we have presented over 350 live streamed shows for free. So I'm here, you guessed it, to ask for your support in our mission. Now, when you support Impro, you are helping us to offset those costs, to expand our programming, to strengthen our community, and to spread joy. And you're not only helping the performances, you're also helping the school, which is a vital, safe, welcoming place for artists of all levels and backgrounds. And we've made it very easy to make a donation. Just go to improtheatre.com, click the donate button, or you can go to, you can text it from your phone, text Impro to 44321. That's 44321, text Impro. And we are a nonprofit organization, so it's completely tax deductible. Well, thank you very much for listening to this pitch and for making a donation. And please enjoy the show.
Impro Theatre and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization. In Los Angeles, we pay our respect to the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. Impro Theatre supports the promotion of an anti-racist world, where we recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion as central to our values. We are listening, learning, and growing. We invite you to join us in taking action wherever we can to create a more just world.
Hey everybody, welcome to Impro Talk. Mike Rock here from Impro Theatre in Los Angeles. Very excited about our guest today, who you will meet shortly. Let's go to improtheatre.com for information about classes and upcoming shows, or you can, for classes anyway, you can email school@improtheatre.com and find out about what's coming up. Our guest today for Impro Talk is a writer, an actor, an improviser, a director, a life coach, and to his core, a Texan. Please welcome Nick Massouh. Here comes Nick. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I just didn't know I was so faceted. But yes, there's all these different aspects of me.
Well, I think I found out last time we talked that you were born in El Paso, but grew up in another part of Texas, or born in one.
Reverse. I was born in Michigan. My
Oh,
family,
yeah, that's right.
my family's from the Midwest. My father's from Canton, Ohio. My mother's from Grand Rapids, Michigan. My father worked in the auto industry, so I was born in Detroit. But the auto industry moved him to El Paso, Texas when I was 5. So I grew up in El Paso. Like most of my, memories and my upbringing and my influences are El Paso, Texas based.
Do you remember the transition, or is 5 too early to have remembered going from like, Midwestern and winter and cold and stuff to Texas?
I mean, I have some memories of what it was like in Michigan, and my father has since moved back to outside Detroit, so I have also revisited the street we grew up on, which was just happened to be a street. It was called Newport Court, where there was a lot of young families. So there's like a lot of memories where like all these young families were associating. Some of those families we still know. So I have memories like that, and we did have a year stint in Huntsville, Alabama, before we went to El Paso, and I kind of have a vague little couple memories about that. But what I remember, there's 2 things I remember about going to El Paso. One is the sort of emotional impact it had on the family of like, oh shit, we just got to Huntsville and now we're moving again. For me, it didn't matter that much because I had no whatever. I was like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. But like my oldest brother, it was hard for him, and my mom, had been moving around a lot too. But So that's one thing I remember is the emotional impact. And then the other thing I remember is flying into El Paso. Still to this day, when you fly into El Paso and you look out the window, it's nothing but desert. And you look out the window and you're like, "Oh my, where are we? Where has this taken us?" I remember that. But once we were there, you know, the differences in I was too young to know the difference, but
Yeah.
because like I said, we grew up on a street with a lot of close family friends, so I remember a few of them, and one family in particular who we're still close with. So I wouldn't necessarily say like I missed them and then sort of like an emotional impact, but yeah, I remembered them and remembered that being with that family was always fun and was always enjoyable, but I didn't have residual pain until I lost my kindergarten girlfriend. Like, I had a kindergarten girlfriend. Apparently, I recall it. Her name was Jessie. I don't know her last name, and I do believe we kissed over a game of Candyland. And then she moved. She moved to California. Actually,
Oh,
that's all I ever know. That's all I know is her name was Jessie, and she moved to California and I believe we kissed. It's like a whatever little kid peck, whatever. I don't know. I don't even know if that actually happened, but I remember that in my mind. So I did have a residual grief and loss after that tragic event. That
probably why you have a sideline in the mental health industry to help others.
yes,
Uh,
to reconcile my own pain. Yes, I have three older brothers. I'm the youngest, four boys, no girls. Even the dog was male, and
were you treated like the baby who was like the source of entertainment, or was it more of a Lord of the Flies competition? Get the sugar crisp before anybody else, or what was the story with?
amongst the brothers, no, I was the stepping stone, or no, that's not even the right. Is that the right phrase? Stepping stone, whatever you step on without thinking about it, not something you step on to get to somewhere. Uh, um, no, amongst the brothers, I was definitely put in my place. But amongst, my mother,
Yeah,
she would never admit this, but
you were the
I
favorite.
may have been her favorite.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that makes sense. Were you one of those kids in the neighborhood who was like, were you a performing artist from the jump?
I definitely sought attention. I don't know if I was performing in that way, which I guess some people do. But no, I sought attention um, in any way that I could get it from my brothers or from anybody. Not always using the best tactics. Sometimes probably being the annoying little brother. Um, but yes, I think I sought attention. I was usually commonly told by um, my family, "Oh, you're too young for that." So a lot of times I couldn't participate in things. Um, so I also cultivated an observer mind because I would have to watch a lot.
Yeah. Did everybody go buy cowboy boots and cowboy hats and just go for it like right away?
I don't, I not really. I mean, I don't look. El Paso isn't really like that. I guess any sort of major city in Texas has enough diversity in it that not everybody's wearing. Not
Sure.
everybody's popping the boots on. Though I did when I went to high school. By that point, I started wearing boots all the time. Um, in particular, Texas boots, Red Wings were the common. Although I don't think they're made in Texas, they might actually be made in
Red Wing is from Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yeah, I was gonna say Minnesota. But yes, that is the popular sort of basic Red Wing boot that a lot of Texans would wear. Definitely also became the sort of frat boot, like frat boys in Texas wear Red Wings. Now I didn't go to school in Texas, so I was allowed to wear Red Wings and not be associated with the moniker of frat boy. Um, and now, all my brothers still live in Texas. Only one actually wears boots. and he feels like he needs to because he's in Amarillo, he's a lawyer, and he works with like a lot of, you know, he's become very this is a side, he's become very what's the right word, prominent in the cattle industry. So he does a lot of cattle law, yeah, buying and selling ranches, yeah, yeah, big industry. It's not that the only thing that his law firm does, but I think somehow in in his, matriculation through his career, he's just become one of the go-to guys for that sort of thing.
Yeah. You have to
Um,
have boots if you're going to go
you gotta
visit
be
a ranch. And I mean,
yes,
come on.
it's
Kidding me?
part yes. No, I'm the only one. My oldest brother is a musician, or was, never went professional with it. Was smarter than I was and got an actual real job. But he played guitar from a very young age, so he's, musically inclined. Everyone and all my brothers, all of us in our family, do feel comfortable speaking in front of people. Uh, we're all very good at communication and management of people, and relationships like that. So there's some like crossover skills to performance, I think, in that. But no, none of them perform. No. Well, we
Nothing
did
wrong.
all eat dinner together. Yes, yes, that was we all sat down to dinner together. And we never had assigned chores, but yes, definitely my father would use four boys as muscle to do things he needed to get done. Certainly. But we were never really like a chore allowance type family. It was just, you just did things if somebody needed help.
Sure.
But
Yeah, of course.
we were pretty wholesome, if that's what you're getting at. Yeah, we were wholesome.
Yeah.
The Massouh boys were known for being, good boys. Well, the thing is, though, here's the thing: is like I said earlier, I was always told you're too young for that. You're too young, and I think that was part of um, this. I don't know if my dad's going to listen to this. If he does, I would love to hear him corroborate this or not. I think it was part of the fact that, like, wrangling four boys is a lot, and wrangling
Yeah.
four boys when you're trying to do yard work or like get up on the roof to do some work up there, or like hang Christmas lights or whatever. It's a lot. So it's a little bit easier to like tell one of them you're too young, even though that one, I may have been at the age that the oldest was at when he first started doing X, Y, and Z. So because of that, like I'm not handy. I don't know how to fix things. I don't feel comfortable with tools in my hands. I feel great assisting my mom shopping. That I was fantastic at.
Yeah.
Really good. Yeah, like even mowing the lawn. I never mowed the lawn. My brothers did, but but I never did.
Wow. It sounds like you had a smooth and easy go of it, actually. Pretty
Yes,
jealous.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's like I said, it's created deficiencies in my life. So, you know, ask my wife. When it comes time to like hang a picture on the wall, I get a little nervous. I'm like, yeah, but I might put a hole in it. And what happens if there's
There's
a hole in the
YouTube.
wall?
There's
And
YouTube now. Come on.
you just plaster over the hole and then do a little touch up paint. I was like, oh,
Oh,
oh, that's okay. Well, okay, let's hang some paintings.
Nick's wife is Sandra Burns, who is a costume designer, wardrobe person who's done a lot of stuff with Impro Theater here in Los Angeles and on television and film. Did you do any acting as a kid, like community theater, children's theater, church stuff?
I did a couple of like church plays, but that wasn't like, oh, I was pursuing acting. It was just like, it was just the holidays and they wanted to reenact the nativity. So I played Joseph.
Get Nick to
But
play a
but
lamb.
but I kind of got my start doing speeches. And I used to do a lot of oratory and things of that nature. My father would give a lot of speeches and he would practice them in front of his kids, and so I was always around like giving speeches, and he had a whole method for how he marked up his speeches. So that was some of my early sort of relationship to standing in front of people. But it wasn't until ninth grade when I needed, was going into high school, and you had to have some sort of arts credit arts class, and my one of my brothers, my next oldest, Paul, took a theater class. I was like, oh well, he took a theater class. I'll take a theater class, and I took the class, and Mrs. Todar was fantastic, and it was a really cool experience because I would, the first thing I started doing was, we would get a monologue and you have to perform the monologue in front of everybody. And I really got into it. I remember one monologue was back at that time, Eric Bogosian was
Yes.
very popular
Yes.
material for an acting class. I don't remember the name of the piece, but it was like this character who was about to be executed, was on death row. And this was his last sort of thing to say. And so I really got into it. I dimmed the lights in the room. I put a little flashlight. So I did my own stage lighting, and I really had a good time and I enjoyed it. And Mrs. Todar had this thing, for better or for worse, where every month the class would vote on a best actor for the month. And I was voted best actor the majority of the time throughout this period. And I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. Like, I like doing this, and people like it when I do this. Like they think it's good or whatever. So I said, okay, well, I'll take another theater class. And the next year, where I was at, ninth grade was a part of junior high, and so then I went sophomore. You join high school, and I had a different teacher, Mr. Bowen, I think his name was. Great teacher. Anyways, at that time there was a couple of seniors who were like the best in the program, and I kind of looked up to them, and I found out that they were going to go study acting and after high school. I was like, this is how kind of whatever sheltered I am. I'm like, oh, you can do that? You know, that oh oh wait, you can make money on acting. Oh, like I just did that concept of like, oh, you could have a career as an actor, just like never really seeped in until that moment. And then from that moment on, I was like, I think this is what I want to do. And I did theater every year in high school. I did all the plays. I did do like a community theater show my senior year, which upset my high school teacher because I had to turn down one of those plays, and he was like, "Well, he thought I was being all uppity because I wanted to do this community theater show," and I was like, "No, I just want other experience, and I just want to do this other." Anyways, so I did do a lot of theater in high school, and by the time I was a senior, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I auditioned for drama schools and ended up going to USC.
But do you remember or want to talk about any of the high school plays or musicals? Anything that a moment that is a highlight or anything?
I mean, yeah, there's a couple. I mean, I remember a lot of it. Most of it was a highlight. The one play that was just embedded in my brain as just being awesome was we did Noises Off, Michael Frayn. And I can't remember the character name, but I played, it was a movie version. I played the character that John Ritter played in the movie. And our teacher, Mr. Bowen, he came from the tech world. And so he built this 2-story rotating set that, like, our little, our height, like I still kind of think back of like, man, how did he pull that off? But it was like, you have to have a 2-story rotating set to pull off this play. And he did, and it was just incredible. And I learned a lot about physical comedy and timing, and I actually, that's some of my first recollections of doing improv, because I was always, for whatever reason, I was always very good at covering when people went up on their lines. And because I kind of knew everybody's part. I guess I just had the ability to retain the sense of things. So when things would go wrong, and oftentimes they would, especially in a play like that, which is very challenging for high school students, and in this play, it's a farce that depends on timing. So like, if things go wrong, I mean, it's not just like vamping for time. There's a little more work there, and and I didn't equate it to improv at the time. For that they call that ad libbing, right? So it just in hindsight now, I look, at the time I was like, oh, this is what the show needs. I definitely subscribed to the idea the show must go on, and like I took it very seriously, and like all the actor mantras of like, the show is the most important, and you gotta show up no matter what. So in those moments when that happens, I was not going to bail.
Yeah.
I was going to figure it out, and if I could get the train moving again and cover enough, then that's what I would do. And yeah, so now in hindsight, when I look back of like, well, wait, where did my like skills of improv come from? I was like, oh, that's an early indicator of like, oh, maybe I have that ability.
You did you realize early on you were able to learn lines easily or relatively easily?
Yes, yeah, because I mean, I now have a different method for doing it than I did at that time. But yeah, I mean, I was able to learn, a bunch of lines, and I always had this experience, and I still kind of do have this experience today, although I don't do as many scripted plays anymore. But where I can't, when it's time, when the curtain goes up, I can't remember a single line.
Yeah.
But as long as I can get my first line out, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I always make sure I have my first couple lines with me, and once I hit the stage and get those lines out, I'm fine. And that was always the experience in high school. It was like, oh shit, this show's starting. What are my lines? And then once I got out there, I was like, oh, it would just come,
Yeah. It's weird how that happens. It's like the different parts of your nervous system are competing with each other, I do want to talk maybe offline about line memorization, because that's always fascinated me from when I was really young. I think it was easier when I was younger, just because I didn't while learning lines, I didn't worry about forgetting them in a performance. I was just learning them.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you get when you're getting auditions and callback auditions and etc., you start to get inside your head about like, oh, don't forget, don't mess up the line.
I know. Yeah, it's that fear can really make your mind go blank.
So what kind of stuff did you do? Your USC degree is a BFA in acting, is that right? Yeah. And did you land at USC and you're like, boom, we're off and running and doing stuff that you liked to do right away, or was sort of like there a transition process from having, because obviously in high school, once you were a senior and you were also doing community theater, you were probably acting in anything and everything you wanted to, and then things are a little slightly different.
Well, I had at least done a fair amount of research in different programs to choose a program that I wanted, and what I wanted was a conservatory program. But my parents said, we're not going to help you go to a conservatory program unless you get a degree. So the closest thing to doing that is a BFA, as opposed to a BA. And a BFA is basically you take the least amount of outside classes to get a degree. And in that, and as you start to research about BFA programs, they're all like a little bit different here or there, but the ones that spoke to me the most were the ones that like you had guaranteed shows. So USC had a system where starting your second semester of your freshman year, you had a class show every semester. So in a sense, I couldn't do any show I wanted, but I was always guaranteed one show, and that appealed to me. So the audition process was just more about which character you were going to be, as opposed to whether or not you were going to make it in. So I chose a school specifically for that reason.
It's funny. I think I've never really completely understood the difference between a BFA program and like a straight up conservatory program. I've always kind of equated them, but they're definitely different.
Well, conservatory program is not within a university or right. So you walk away with an associate's degree, which you then, if you want to get an actual degree, you got to take some general education courses.
Got to go back and get your math.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't take a single math class in college.
uh,
I did take a
was
neuroscience class.
yeah, go ahead.
I was to say, but I did take a neuroscience class.
Oh, good. Oh, nice. I did too. Was USC where you assembled with your sketch comedy group Summer of Tears? Was that a USC group of people?
Yes, yes. And at USC, there was a sort of an ongoing improv troupe. Ongoing meaning like if you graduate, you leave, and then they bring on new members when old members leave. So it was a group called Cometus Interruptus, which is still there today. And when I was there, was maybe 10 years old. Um, and yeah, and I had seen them. They perform like every Friday on the main square outside, and so I had seen them perform, and I had watched a lot of Whose Line Is It Anyway in high school, so I had an appreciation for improv, and I'd watch them, and I'd be like, oh, that was that's cool, and I don't know if somebody said, oh, you should audition, or if I'd thought to audition myself, whatever. I auditioned. And I didn't get in. And do you want to hear that audition story? It's kind of funny.
Of course.
So I didn't know much about improv other than to say yes, right? I knew that. Say yes. I knew maybe like don't ask questions. Some of the basic some of the basic classic rules are like say yes, don't ask questions. Other than that, all I knew is just, be in the scene and whatever. And so we're playing superheroes. For those of you who don't know, Superheroes is a game where you get some sort of trait that's your superhero superpower. And then you play a scene with that as that person. So I was in a scene with this actress who was not from America. She was international. So I don't know if that actually plays in or not, but it probably doesn't. But it was just as fast when I recount it and I do her voice, it'll make sense. But we're superheroes, and I don't know what her quality was, but I was Vacuum Man. Okay, so I was Vacuum Man. I can't remember what her quality was, but there was some problem that we were trying to solve, and she goes, suck the shit from my asshole. And I quickly went to what I know, which is to say yes. So I said yes, and I took an attachment, popped it onto her, turned it on, and used this machine to suck. And that's you could just feel the room just kind of tighten up. But like it wasn't my fault. Like I was trying to be a team player. I mean, I don't know what was about it, but I didn't get in. And I was a bit of a prideful person where I was like, well, fine, if they don't want me, fuck
If they don't want someone who's going to say yes and at all costs, then that's their problem.
That's their problem. But at the time, Jason Reitman, Jason Reitman,
Ivan Reitman's son,
who's now a famous movie director. He was in Cometus Interruptus at the time, and him and a couple other guys came up to me and were like, you should audition again next year. And I was like, cool. But in my mind, I was like, fuck no, I'm not going to audition, because I was a little too prideful. But then the next year came around, and this one guy, Matt Schwartz, hilarious guy, came up to me and said, Nick, are you going to audition? I was like, no, I'm not going to audition. He goes, no, you need to audition. I said, okay. And it just so happened that, Jason Reitman had graduated, and there was a number of people who were in his year, so there was a lot of vacancies. It was maybe only like 3 people left. And so when they auditioned and they brought new people in, there was majority new people. There was like 5 of us, 5 new people or whatever. So we bonded in such a way that was very unique, I think. And the guy who was kind of running it, who I'm still close with, he was a bit militant, I think, in a good way, where it was like, we're going to work our ass off to be the best improvisers we can possibly be. We're going to postpone our weekly shows until we all get on the same page and we're all good. And there was something that about that just really bonded us. And so when we did come out to do a show, it was gangbusters. And we had some magic chemistry that we turned an audience of 40 on a weekly basis into like an audience of anywhere from 100 to 150.
Fantastic.
And so you don't find that kind of chemistry all that often. And when we graduated, the majority of us stayed together and got into sketch. So it wasn't everybody out of that group, but the core of it, that's where that came from. And then we created a sketch troupe called Summer of Tears, which had a mild amount of success. And we were, if we want to go down the Summer of Tears trend, we were so close. We were like, for people who know sketch, especially sketch at that time, Lonely Island had just popped, and that's and Andy Samberg and Yorma, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyways, who eventually went to Saturday Night Live. US or the HBO Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen was still a thing, and if like you went there, then you were going to be big. So Lonely Island had just popped. Whitest Kids You Know, they got a TV show on some cable network, I can't remember. Some other USC group, actually, that wasn't an improv group at USC, they went to the comedy festival and they got a show on MTV for a year or two. So we're like, oh, okay, we know the formula. And we were, there was a time when we were headlining, and the sketch troupe, I can't remember their name, but the one that did Workaholics, that TV show,
Yeah,
they were opening up for us. It's like we're like surrounded by like all these sketch troupes that got TV shows, but we didn't. And we got a pilot presentation from Warner Brothers, and we just, I personally don't think we took the right angle, but whatever. I think we tried to go mainstream network style, and it just didn't quite work anyway. So it didn't go anywhere.
but what did happen out of Summer of Tears was that Dan O'Connor from Impro came and did improv classes with you guys, and kind of.
In a sense, no. When we were at Cometus at USC, we hired Dan O'Connor to come teach us.
Okay.
This is pre-Summer of Tears.
Sorry. So, but he is ultimately your connection back to improv later.
Yes, he came and we hired like the guy who was running, Todd Waldman, who eventually also ran Summer of Tears. He was very organized for a sophomore in college, and was able to like go and seek out who were the good teachers in town. And so we brought in Dan O'Connor. We also brought in I think her name was Mary Jo Smith from the Groundlings. So we brought in people to come teach us. But yeah, we developed a relationship with Dan from there. And then he also eventually substitute taught at USC, not my class, but classes that people from Summer of Tears were in. And then we developed a relationship with him at that time that ended up being why I ended up going to improv later.
Was your USC program one of those programs where you're discouraged from, or actually not allowed to audition professionally while you're still in school, or was that not part of it?
I think at that time, I think, yes, generally at that time, most schools discouraged you from doing that sort of thing. I think nowadays it's probably, I think generally they probably still want you to focus on your studies, but I imagine they're a little bit more accommodating.
But at some point you do start getting television work, and a short film that you were in, West Bank Story, wins an Academy Award.
I mean, who knew? Yeah, which was a USC grad film, but it wasn't because of my USC ties. This was a couple years out of school. I had I had an agent um, who got me this audition, and it was, it's one of those grad school films, and so you always gotta like, is this good? Like, and the way you could tell it was potentially gonna be good is that it said it was gonna shoot on 35 millimeter. I was like, okay, if they're gonna shoot on 35 millimeter, they probably have a budget. They probably gonna take this thing seriously. Um, so yeah, it was a musical, and I had to sing and dance, which is not my my greatest skill set, though inside in my heart and soul, I am a musical theater performer. It's just not something that anyone would want to pay to see. Um, but it was a great experience. And there's a friend of mine, a Summer of Tears guy also got cast in it, Will Greenberg. So we were both in it together, just randomly. Um, and several people from that I'm still friends with. But yeah, it ended up winning an Academy Award. It was called West Bank Story. It was a take on West Side Story, but with, Israelis and Palestinians and having rival falafel stands. Um, and it was great. I mean, just struck the right chord. It was really well done. Ari Sandel, who's now has a nice directing career, was the director, and yeah, who knew? I mean, like, I was like, oh, I just did this thing. It was fun. It was whatever, and the next thing you know, it's nominated for an Oscar, and then it wins. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, my career's been downhill since, but
But you end up doing a bunch of episodics: Bones, Mind of Mencia, Without a Trace, Californication, ER, Private Practice, two different NCIS franchises.
uh-huh.
Um, in those early, to talk a little bit about those first handful of TV jobs, did you feel like you were learning more each time, or were they just like get in, get out, just make sure you know your lines and you hit your mark? Or did you feel like you're starting to understand better how things work? How did that feel? I mean, you might even not frame it that way.
I mean, I don't, I'm always learning. So whether that is what the question is or not, I don't, I always look at everything as an opportunity to learn. Although now at this point in my career, there's definitely some jobs I get where might be a little jaded, but I should try to, remain like, no, everything's an opportunity to learn. But definitely at that time, and um, learned a lot. And my first real TV gig was Gilmore Girls. It was like this little bit part on Gilmore Girls, and I remember going on set, and the first thing that somebody said to me was like, "Say your lines really fast, or else you're going to get edited out of this thing."
Oh.
Yeah. Well, Gilmore Girls, I don't know if you remember at all, but they started this sort of fast talk where it's just like, go, you know? And I was like, oh, okay. So that was like a real, I mean, I only had 2 lines, so it wasn't like some monumental task for me to do that, but it was a real eye opener. Um, and then I think was my next job, Bones, and that was a guest star, which, I didn't understand the difference between guest star and co-star, and
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, I got that, and then I learned something new on that set. I was opposite David Boreanaz and Emily Deschanel, and David Boreanaz, who already had, was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and then had his own series of Angel and all that stuff. So he's, an accomplished TV actor. I'm sitting across from him in this scene, and he's talking like this. All his lines are like this. So he's talking like this and I couldn't hear a word of anything he was saying. It was just everything was just right here. And I'm like, I come from theater, and I'm just like blowing up the room with my voice. But all I could do was wait till his lips stopped moving and then say my line, because I had no idea what he was saying. I couldn't hear anything. But I'm sitting there in my mind going, he is a famous TV star. He obviously knows something. He's obviously what he's doing works on some level. And I've come to realize that that is a good tool to have more emotional flexibility if you just kind of keep things a little bit softer and lighter. as opposed to what I'm used to, which is like blowing the doors off a room because I want to reach the the 50th row of the theater or whatever.
Stalls, as they say in the UK. Yeah, I learned that on a set too. I was talking too loud, and one of the assistant director just came up and said, like, "Hey, you don't need to say it that loud." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Still to this day, like I'm always trying to like find the balance because, yeah, because I definitely feel more comfortable being loud. But I do think I have a more emotional flexibility when I'm being soft. So it's really fascinating experience. I did a bit part on Californication, and again, it was still in that phase where I was the loudest one in the room, and I could tell like David Duchovny was like this fucking guy, and I was just, I was just like, well, I don't know how else to be. Like I'm a theater actor. But yeah, so I have a lot of those cutting teeth roles that I learned over the years of like how to do my craft and how to be pro.
Is there a job that you remember as being like, "Oh, I've crossed some sort of a threshold here"?
Yeah, I think there's one. I mean, the interesting thing like about my situation is I'm basically, I don't know if day player is the right word, but most of my resume is like, oh, one episode on this show. So I come in, I do my thing, and I leave. And I long for the day when I can have a more longer recurring roles, or even a series regular where I can sink my teeth into something and be the professional actor that I've always imagined being. So it's interesting when I look at like, oh, all the work I've done, because a lot of it feels very, I don't want to say simple, but just none of it. None of it feels like, oh yes, that's what I want to do. But I have had roles that I've really, really enjoyed, and I think one in particular that if I were to go to, it'd be like, hey, you really want to see, kind of what I'm capable of. I did a nice part on Lucifer, um, where I play this sort of Middle Eastern white collar criminal, and it's kind of both. Lucifer's a little campy, so it's a little bit both serious and comedic at the same time. So and I'm an improviser. I do a lot of comedy, but I don't do comedy on TV. Just I don't know. I could point to reasons why I think that is, but whatever. My career just hasn't gone that way. And this is like one of the few things on my resume where there's a couple laughs you might have while watching it. Now it's with an accent, as many of my roles have been throughout the years. So I would prefer to, I long for the day where I can just be, somebody more closer to more closer to myself. But it's a lot of fun. It's super playful. I remember on set, like usually when you're the guest coming in, they shoot you last. They always shoot the regulars first, and then they shoot you last. So I sat there while they shot everybody, and then it was finally time to turn the camera around and shoot me. And I did my part, and I threw in a couple little things. And when they called cut, the whole crew busted up laughing.
Oh,
And
that's
it was
great.
just like, oh God, this feels so good.
Yeah.
And like and the energy just shifted. Like I've been on sets where it's just like, okay, can we get this guy's role over with so we can move on? But this suddenly became about like, yes, this is our guest actor. He's crushing it. The writer's coming up to me and he's talking to me and goes, oh man, I love what you're doing. It's exactly what I envisioned and even better, and so having that experience where people don't treat you like the guest actor, they kind of treat you like you're a pro doing your job, that felt really good, and the final product is good, and when people watch it, or people who have seen it and they realize that was me, they're like, oh, that was so great, so that's maybe something I could point to as something that I'm proud of, and I would feel good about showing it to somebody and saying, yeah, check this out, check me out in this.
You alluded to this, and I'm going to kind of like tune in on it a little bit, but so your heritage is Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian.
excuse me,
Remember?
and Texan and Michigander. And so you have a lot of these roles that would be considered, Arab Peninsula or Middle Eastern or something like this. And we talked back in April. We did an episode of this show with a few other guests talking about Arab American Appreciation Month. Talk a little bit about that conundrum of auditioning and getting cast in roles. There's a particular story I'm going to ask you about, but I just generally speaking, getting cast specifically for a role that is listed as, this is an ethnic role or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because, as an actor coming up, I thought, oh, one of my greatest assets is that I'm like a little bit ethnically ambiguous, amorphous. I could, people don't really know where I'm from sometimes, where I'm Middle Eastern or could be Italian or Greek or even Latin of, some respects. And then I thought also just plain American, which I've come to find is not how I get perceived. Now, a big event, 9/11 happened, and it changed the industry for Middle Eastern actors. And I think that's when. Now, I was just getting started. I was just graduated, so I don't know what the industry would have been like for me before that. In one sense, it opened up a lot of more Middle Eastern roles. So that was nice. However, most of those Middle Eastern roles were bad guys, terrorists, and whatnot. It also opened up the floodgates for Middle Eastern actors to come to Hollywood in droves. So the competition increased. But somewhere, I don't know. I don't know if it's my representation or if it's just Hollywood itself or how things have progressed. But I have a very difficult time getting in the room for any character that's not Middle Eastern. And I don't quite understand it because my name is Nick. Now my last name is Massouh, but most people not in the know wouldn't even know where that name comes from. I don't know how it is. I mean, it's definitely nice that like if there's a Middle Eastern character breakdown, I can get into audition for it. Not all the time, but it's a nice way in. But I'm not going to get the guy named Frank or Bob or Bill. I'm going to get the guy named Khalid or Farouk.
Bashir al-Fazad or Nazir
Yeah.
or Adnan or Abu Hakim al-Badi.
And then I have to I'm very proud of the fact that I can do an Arabic accent. It comes from imitating the people I grew up with. But when I get an audition now, I have to ask, is this with an accent or without an accent? And then oftentimes it's, must speak some lines in Arabic. So it's like, if I want to keep and I don't speak Arabic, but I've learned Arabic for roles. I once learned a monologue in Arabic overnight, and I booked the job somehow the next day. It still astounds me that I did that. And that was the first time I was like, oh, maybe I can learn Arabic. And so I every time, but it's really hard to get an audition and call an Arabic coach and try to learn. So
a lot of people, I should interrupt for 1 second, say, especially for episodic television, an audition will come, let's say you get the audition notice from your agent at noon on Monday. Typically, the audition is going to happen within 24 or 48 hours. I mean, you do not have the luxury of like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to travel to, I'm going to go back to Lebanon and live with my cousins for a month and learn, and then come back and audition. Now you have 24 hours maybe, or 36 hours.
And my manager is he's got it in his head that I can do this. And I don't want to tell him no, I can't, because I don't want to rein him in, because there are times, it's also American television where you don't have to be perfect, right? So I don't want to limit my my exposure, but it's also becomes like a real become a real problem sometimes. And the first time I did it though, I was literally on set assistant directing a friend. So I was on set when the audition came in, and it said, must speak Arabic. And I looked at the thing, and it was this Arabic monologue, and they didn't translate it. And it was like, I think it might have been the next day. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And I had never, to this point, I had never done that before. The only thing I had done, and I'll try to get this story quick, I was doing another role uh, for his TV show called Intelligence. And on the day of like a big day of a lot of filming, I even had a fight scene. The producer comes in and said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we want you to speak these lines in Pashto." I was like, "I don't speak Pashto." They said, "Well, yeah, we brought in a Pashto coach. Can you do that?" I was like, "Sure." So I did it. And I pulled it off. So then that was what got in my manager's head of like, "Oh, he can do this." So anyway, so that's how that came to this, where he submitted me for something where it said must speak Arabic. But yeah, I called up an Arabic actor I knew. He actually speaks a different Arabic than I'm even accustomed to. Like Egyptian Arabic's different than Lebanese Arabic. So anyways, I wrote it all out. I went over it with him. I learned it. I learned it. I went in there the next day, and I am surrounded by like Arabs, like people from the old country, and who speak Arabic fluently. And I'm like, the only way I'm going to get this job is with my acting. It's not going to come from my knowledge of knowing Arabic. And it was a terrorist role. And the monologue was supposed to be like, one of those sort of like the terrorist speaking to the camera, making his demands, shaking a finger and being angry or whatever it is. So I had this little device where a person doing that would have a script in front of them, right? Potentially. So I was able.
And we should also say, when you audition for your first audition, your initial audition for any job, it's standard. It's okay to have your script in your hand when you're auditioning.
It's okay to have your script in your hand, and I actually prefer to have my script in my hand always. But they prefer you to not really look at it.
Yeah,
they want you to be memorized. So it's like this weird sort of double-edged sword. And
you're making your demands into the video camera.
I'm taking my dance, but it's okay that I am sounding like a guy reading something. Like that was the angle I took. It's like, let me make it sound like I'm reading this as I do that. So I incorporated the fact that I had the script with me as part of the role. And then for the part that was in English, I was like, that's the part I need to crush. And I did. I crushed it. And I booked it. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? How did this happen? And then I did it. And then my manager's like, oh, well, he can do it now. And then I was like, still, let's be mindful. But yeah, I did it. And it was good. It was for Designated Survivor. And that actually was a
Sutherland show.
Yeah, that was actually a very good experience too. The main scene I had was with Maggie Q and this other actor, I can't remember his name, and it was like, they're interrogating me, and I'm all in the orange jumpsuit and chained up, and that was a cool experience. But yeah, that was the first time I learned Arabic, and then I found a real Arabic coach. And then I went on the string of auditioning for roles that had to speak Arabic. And it was really cool and interesting, and I learned a lot. I didn't really book any of them. I came close on a lot of them, which was interesting. But yeah, I would prefer not to these days.
Go ahead.
I would say I would love to learn Arabic, and I've tried, but I just don't have the time to do it.
You met with the family. Do you remember in that Designated Survivor, had you written it down in English phonetically to sound?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to be blown away if you.
No, that's impossible. I mean, what you're talking about is probably the best way to do it, is to learn Arabic writing, because you'll be able to speak the sounds better. But man, the learning curve there.
Oh yeah, come on.
I've gone down that road already a little bit, and I'm like, Jesus, this is going to take. I just know I need to write it in English in phonetics. And
We don't have the luxury of a ton of time, but I want to touch on this topic that we talked about a little bit in with our roundtable with Cheryl and Joy and yourself back last year, which is this thing that you've again that we've just been talking about, this playing terrorists and that sort of thing. There's a story, I don't remember what show it is. It might have been this show, but because you went on to do a bunch of episodes of Designated Survivor, but there's a story you told about where this guy was threatening to blow up something, and then they changed the script at the last minute to make it. Can you tell that a little bit of that?
so yeah, so that was Bones. That was my very first big role, and it was to play a terrorist, and I was very emotionally conflicted because I, one of my sort of aspirations was to try to like break the stereotypes of Arabs in media, and here I was being offered this role of a terrorist, and not only that, I think I had to accept the role before I read the script. I think so. So I can't remember. Yeah, I think I had to accept the role. I don't think I knew how the story ended when I had to accept the role, but it was still emotionally conflicted. And I remember calling up one of my Lebanese friends that I had growing up, and I talked to him, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think? I'm really conflicted." And his response was, "Do it, man. That sounds awesome." you know. And he's like, "Don't worry about all that stuff. If you want to change it later when you got your career going." And I was like, "All right." Now, he's a good friend and he had a strong perspective, but he may not have been the right person with like, the sort of same artistic integrity that maybe I could have given myself.
Right. So he was a friend from growing up, but he wasn't like a Hollywood actor
Oh,
person.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
just an outside, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I had lunch at one point with Tony Shalhoub, where he was like, told me that he refuses to play any terrorist roles and all this stuff. He had a much different career and up, coming up than I did, in New York theater at a time when, not way pre 9/11 and all that stuff. Um, I still feel that in my heart because Tony Shalhoub is like, who I look up to in terms of role models. But and to know
Also,
that I've played after this lunch, I've played so many terrorists. I feel like a piece of my soul has been tarnished.
I should say that Tony Shalhoub is from Wisconsin, so I'm glad that he did not find out you were from Michigan, because that would have been a big problem.
Oh, that would have been messy.
Yeah.
But so I said yes to the role, and then I find out that this character at the end of this episode blows up a school bus full of children.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that's even worse. I was like, if I'm going to play a terrorist, terrorists don't blow up school buses full of children. They usually have some sort of political stance or some sort of, ideology they're doing. And they're not going to go blow up children. That's just not what they do. This is really bad. And then my first day on set, I ended up getting in a conversation with Emily Deschanel, who's super sweet, very nice. And I kind of just like sideways mentioned it. I was like, yeah, this ending, it just feels weird. And like, this just wouldn't happen. And I feel weird about it. And da da da. And I don't know if she did this or not, but the next day the ending changed. I don't know if she went to the writer's room and was like, you can't do
Well, I
this.
mean, come on. Clearly.
Right? I mean, right. And instead of blowing up a school bus full of children, he was targeting a peace rally. I'm like, yes, it's innocent people, but at least it's a peace rally. It's a, you know what I mean? That there, you can make a political stance there. Killing children is not a political stance. So that made it up. So yeah, so that was that experience. I credit Emily Deschanel for it, whether she did it or not. She was super nice to me on set and very like awesome to work with. So I want to give her all the credit. So, and then now I now am in this place where I've played so many terrorists that I don't know what to make of it really. I don't really want to play them anymore unless it's a really good role that shows the complexity of what it means to be put in that situation, which is very rare to find. Um, but at the same time, I like playing bad guys. Um, I'm good at playing bad guys. And if I'm playing a bad guy and my ethnicity, it's very common that it might be a terrorist. So it's tricky. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about improv is I can be anything. Like I'm not restricted by what I look like. I'm not restricted by what somebody else thinks of me. Um, I can play any character, any age, any gender, and I can pull from my own creativity, and I can play roles that I aspire to play in TV and film, but it does just don't get cast in. Um, and yeah, that's 100% why I love improv. Um, yeah, it allows me to actually have a voice, my own voice, and even if I, as an actor, like even if I wasn't just being typecast the way I have been, still as an actor, you're still doing somebody else's idea always, and many times if you're not at a place where you can pick and choose your jobs, um, a lot of times you're still doing roles that you probably wouldn't have chosen to do. Um, so so with improv, usually I get the opportunity to kind of take control of my art form and have my creativity express itself the way I want it to. So
At one point, you took over and were the director of Impro Theater School, and you've been improvising, as you said, since college, and have been a founding company member here at Impro in LA. What's your message or your thought for both young creative people or any age? I don't mean to be ageist, but a creative person who's not really sure what to do next or where to go or how to express themselves. Do you have some piece of advice to
well,
offer?
as a former life coach, I do have I've had a lot of those types of talks, and some of my clients have been actors. Um, but no, what I always say, and I've always said, even pre being a life coach or whatever, is get involved in whatever it is. You never know what you're doing is going to lead to, and when you get involved, do your best always. No matter if you hate the production, no matter if you think it's low rent, low budget, it's not going anywhere. Always do your best and get involved. Take the first step, and it will lead to the next step. And as long as you have your own professional integrity about what you do, it will yield positive results. Um, everything. Strangely, a lot of the things, the key sort of points in an actor's career um, that I've gotten have come through doing theater. So I got my SAG card doing bad theater. And that's people, well, how does that happen? Well, in this show I was doing, there was a extras casting director who said, "Hey, do you have your SAG card?" I was like, "No." She goes, "Oh, you're a good actor. You need your SAG card. Let me help you." I was in my first agent. I was in an acting class with Joe McGinley, one of the company members at Impro, and she said, "Do you have an agent?" I was like, "No." She goes, "You need an agent. Let me introduce you to mine." Right. And just recently, the last TV gig I just got, it's an interesting gig, but came from somebody seeing me in an improv show. I was like, "Oh yes, he can do this." Um, so whether you're taking a class, whether you're doing theater in some hole in the wall, um, whatever it is you're doing, do your best, have personal integrity, and it will lead somewhere. It'll take you to the next thing. It may not take you where you thought you were going to go, but it will progress you. And if you get too rigid about where you think you're supposed to go, you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. At one point in my career, is another piece of advice I give now is I started saying yes to what was easy. instead of trying for what's hard. Because when things come to you, when a show comes to you, or an offer comes to you, or an invitation comes to you, sometimes you're like, oh, well, I didn't try for that. And you're like, it's probably not a cool, whatever. They didn't, it's not, I didn't strive for that. It just came to me. So it's probably not worth, it probably doesn't have value. When I switched my thinking and said yes to what came to me, things just really started to move. And when I said, okay, I may have had an image as to what I thought my career would be, but I want to let go of that and say yes to what's coming to me. I ended up meeting what my image was eventually, but it had a lot of fun surprises, like being a professional improviser, which I never thought was a thing. But I think I can fairly say at this point in my career, I'm a professional improviser, which I think when I started wasn't really a thing. Was it?
It was, but for a very, very,
very select few,
tiny percentage of people. Yeah, that's so great what you said. I mean, if you're rigid about where you think you're supposed to go, you're probably going to be disappointed. That's what we teach in ensemble storytelling, ensemble narrative storytelling. If you get rigid about where you think this story should go, you're going to be wrong. You're going to be unhappy, and you're probably going to make other people unhappy. I'm really excited about your next job that you just hinted at.
Want me to tell you what it is?
Sure, yeah, please.
It's very exciting. You know how Netflix and other streaming sites are now presenting international shows?
Sure.
Well, you can watch those shows with subtitles, or you could watch those shows dubbed.
Yeah.
So I got cast to dub a Belgian show, and I'm playing the main character. So it's funny. I finally got what I wanted, which was like to play a series regular in a TV show, but you're just gonna hear my voice on somebody else's face.
I did a couple of voices on a show called The Valhalla Murders for Netflix, and a friend, maybe meaning well, said, "Oh, you're not one of the leads?" And I was like, no. No. So congratulations. But that's really cool. What show? What is it called?
It's called Soil.
Okay.
I just finished this week, and I think they're hoping to release it either next month or March. It's a really fun show. It's kind of like a drama comedy. Yeah, about a Moroccan family in Belgium that repatriates deceased members, because apparently in the Muslim community, you bury people on the national soil where they came from. So yeah, it's been so fun, and it's such a trip. It's a whole new industry for actors. I shouldn't say new; it's always been there, but I think it's just becoming more
material. There's more stuff to voice.
Yeah.
Soil. That's really cool. So turn on the dubbing. What is it? Yeah, dubbing. I was going to say turn on the ADR, but that's not what it's called.
No.
For Soil.
The dubbing feature.
And hear Nick Massouh. Nick, I know you have to get back because you're a busy family man, and I really appreciate you taking an hour to talk to us on Impro Talk.
Well, I really appreciate you inviting me on, and I love that you're doing this. I think this is fantastic.
Thank you for watching and or listening. Nick, thank you for being my guest, and we'll see you on the improv screen or on the Soil screen at some point.
You won't see me, but you'll hear me.
I mean, here, yes, thank you. All right. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.